It is the Grail. It's a Friday, January 28th. Welcome aboard. This is episode number 57. We chugging along here, grinding it out, finding the cool people in the world that are working outside the box. And today is a great, great guest. I have Vanessa Conlin here, who is a master of wine. And I immediately wanted to know how you become a master of wine, what that entails, what do you got to do? You know, I wanted to know everything about wine. I do not drink wine, but for somebody that wanted to become a master of wine, I knew right away that I needed to talk to this woman because I knew her life was going to be interesting. She was a former musician, performing internationally and on Broadway, out there in New York, rocking it. And then one day decided, nope, I want to start all over and I want to become a master of wine, a wine expert. And the thing I love about her story the most, of course, is what I like about a lot of people. They realize maybe one day, hey, I want to try something different. And as scary as that is, we all know it's crazy scary. We know that most people won't do it. They've been backed into a corner, maybe of some credit card debt or some kind of situation where they don't want to fail. But I'll tell you, you got to fail over and over and over in life to get to something that you love. You know, I don't know anybody really that's ever just said, I'm going to do this. Well, it's very rare. Once in a while, you get like a Prince out there, never had a day job, just said, I'm going to play music, and boom, it does it for the rest of his life. But it is a weird, long life. Hopefully everybody will have. And throughout that, you will have different thoughts in your head of like, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should try that, or maybe I should have. You never want to be that person that said I should have. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Vanessa was a fantastic guest. You're going to love it. Thank you for always tuning in to The Grail. This episode is brought to you by Banker Guitars. Yes, Banker Guitars. You know, Matt out there, I had him on the podcast, just killing it, building some of the greatest guitars ever for people like Marcus King and Mastodon and Blackberry Smoke. Rival Sons, Scott plays them. Everybody's grabbing one of these boutique handmade guitars from Matt and his great wife out there, just building it full on. Check them out, bankerguitar.com. They got the Carina V's, Carina Explorers, and it's just unbelievable what this guy can do with a piece of wood. So check it out, Banker Guitars, and check out this episode right here. Have a great weekend. And as a fair weather fan would say, go Niners! Go Niners! Anyway, hope you guys are great. Here we go. The Grail. You're drinking champagne on a Thursday at, what is it, 11 a.m.?
Why not, man? Yeah.
That is hilarious. How are you? Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm great. I'm Vanessa Conlon. I'm a master of wine and had the pleasure of meeting Dean, 2 weeks ago, something like that, through a mutual friend in Los Angeles at Cut, which I believe is one of, if not your favorite restaurant.
Well, my favorite steakhouse of all time, for sure. For multiple reasons, one being the room, the decor, the music, but of course, Wolfgang, like the guy's a legend, I like legends,
Yeah. I don't know how much of this you caught, but my favorite part of that whole evening was when he gave us a kitchen tour and he was using your phone to take pictures of you, managing this massive tomahawk steak over the grill. And you guys are hamming it up and hamming it up and hamming it up. And finally you stop. And did you see there were like 12 chefs that like ran over and were like pulling everything off the grill frantically. And they were like, it's all burned.
He didn't even care. He was like, get in there. Get closer to the fire. Get closer to the fire. I got my favorite leather jacket on, and I'm worried about like steak grease splatting on it
or catching on fire. So anyway, I hope your photo op was worth it, because I think you ruined about 12 people's dinners that night. So
yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
It was about us.
It was all about you.
It was a dream come true, man, just to hang out with that guy. And I mean, I've eaten in there for years, and it's always amazing to me that he would just spin over to the table. Is he like, is everything good over here? And you're like, what? He's fucking here? You know?
Not only there, I think he sat down with us for like 20, 30 minutes.
It was great. The stories he was telling was insane. Andy Warhol was my friend. You're like, oh, what? You know, it was just, oh my God. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about, I know zero about wine because in my drinking days, I didn't care for wine. And growing up in the Bay Area, I know some of the greatest wine is up there. And now I don't drink at all because I ex-diabetes and stuff, and kind of miss the whole, I feel like this is how funny it is to me. Once Sideways hits, all of a sudden it seemed like everyone was talking about wine. From that day on, there was just this red hot for like 2-3 years. Oh, dude, we're going to Santa Barbara. We're going to try the Pinot, blah, 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 you know? And that was really, of course, wine's been around since, in most people's minds, God, you know?
Yeah.
So how do you become an expert on wine? And let's get into your story a little bit. And what does that mean, and your job and all of that, the whole thing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I did not grow up in a family that had wine either. I mean, my parents love it now because I give them really good shit, but they're both classical musicians, and I think they couldn't afford it, for one, because they were kind of starving artists, but it just wasn't something that we had, at the dinner table. I think, maybe once a month they'd have a dinner party, and maybe they'd like pick something up at the bottom shelf of the grocery store or something like that. So I didn't know anything about it. And I also studied classical music. So I love all types of music. I love blues, I love soul, I love classic rock, but this is what I grew up around. And so I never really imagined doing anything else. And I certainly didn't know that there were careers in wine that even existed,
other than being in like Italy, stomping on grapes or something.
Yeah. Like if you owned a winery, maybe, other than that, I was like, I guess you could be a bartender. I don't know, so I didn't really discover it until I was already in my 20s. I went to school in New York City at Manhattan School of Music. And, like a lot of struggling artists, I had to wait tables. And I realized wow, this is really cool. Plus your check gets a lot higher. if you know how to talk about it at the table. But really there was something that really fascinated me, because a lot of the way that I would hear people talk about it who knew wine, they were using terms that I would hear or I would use talking about music, like harmony and balance and, and like
notes.
Right. Notes of this, notes of that. Exactly. You're exactly right. And also, it's using your senses, you go to a concert, whether it's classical or rock, whatever, we're using our senses to appreciate something, and we can be right beside each other and we're going to have two different experiences because we're not the same person. Right. And it was this, it's the same with wine. I know you don't drink wine, but if we both sat here and had a glass, you are going to experience it and taste it and remember it in a way that's completely different than me. And I think that's so fascinating. So there was something about it that it just made my ears prick up. But, I was still singing and traveling a lot. And so I would start exploring it, particularly if I was in Europe. I would try to, taste all the wines and all that. And then I had a break between gigs when I was in New York. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go just take a class, an amateur 101 wine class. And I thought my head was going to pop off, just everything that goes into making a bottle of wine. It's fascinating. And so I just came home, and I'm kind of a dork. I love to take notes and stuff. And I came home, I had like pages and pages of notes. And I just thought like, this is it. Like, and again, I love music. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm giving this up because I don't like it. But I was like, wow, you know what? Actually, I don't have to do this myself. I can be in the audience and love it and go explore this other thing. So basically I just started at the bottom. I took like a minimum wage job at a retail shop just to like be around the buyer. And
a wine shop
on the Upper West Side. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And just so I could like taste and hear them talk about it. And, it just kind of took off from there. So I worked my way up. I ended up managing that store and then another store. And then I was the buyer for a wine bar. And then eventually, I really needed to take the next step, which is that I had never worked like at a winery or around vineyards. I'd always just been in the city, like selling wine, on the floor. So moved out to Napa Valley in 2010. And that's where I'm talking to you from right here. Yeah. Sitting in Napa. So
it's funny growing up in the Bay Area, I was around wine all my life, and you would do stuff like go on the tour of the champagne factory out there and by Guerneville. What's that place up on the hill there?
Well, there's Schramsberg is like my favorite in the North Coast, but there's Mumm, there's Domaine Chandon.
This one's on the way to Guerneville. It looks like a castle.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It has like a German.
Yeah.
It's right on the. Yes, I know exactly what we're talking about. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but I'm blanking on it. Yeah. Yeah. Scharfenberger. Is that right?
I can't remember, but
okay.
I do remember going there and, drinking the samples. And there was one thing I found out right away. I must be allergic to a champagne or something, because the next morning I woke up, it felt like someone kicked me in the side of the head. It was the worst hangover I ever had. It was just like, oh, how do I get rid of this?
Mm-hmm.
But, and then you would go to Napa. That was a thing that women love to do. We're going to go wine tasting, and they get all cuckoo in there. But I would go on the tours. It was fun and fascinating. You see these giant barrels and everything. But some of my favorites was, I think about 4 years ago, my friend is friends with the Coppolas, and we went out to their winery, and they were like looking at the wine and everything. And I was fascinated by that upstairs of all, Apocalypse Now, the Godfather desk. There's the surfboard, because I love Coppola. But I did start hearing a lot about wine once Coppola starts hitting back in the day. Because when Coppola starts selling wine at first, I think the industry is like, what? And, they were doing some kind of hybrid of the two different types of grapes or whatever. And he starts smashing it, right? And winning prizes. And people are like, whoa. And now he is like one of the kings in the industry. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm right, his wine first came out, was it a screw off top?
It might have been. I mean, there still remains like a bit of a stigma about that, but actually the screw caps have come a really long way.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can get really the same quality in a cork, and then you don't have to worry about things that can happen to a cork because it's a natural product. So sometimes, things can go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, also, there was a cork shortage at one point, I think. And then, but it is funny, like, growing up around the ghetto wines of like Night Train and those things. Now, have you ever drank Night Train? It's weird and insane.
I have to say I've not had Night Train.
I wanted to ask you if you knew anything about those, like gut. What are they? The term is like gut rot wine or
rot gut.
Rot gut. Yeah.
Yeah.
They are the most weirdest. Alcohol in general is weird because I think at first when everyone drinks it, no one goes, this is fantastic. You're a kid, you're drinking soda your whole life. You love like root beer and grape soda and orange crush. And then you get into booze and you're like, ooh, and so you gravitate towards like schnapps and stuff that tastes kind of fun. But It really takes a while to get into wine. Did you like it at first, the taste of it?
Now keep in mind, I was really basically an adult when I first had it. So I did, but you're exactly right. But I think if you look at particularly the American diet, and there's so much sugar, like even when you don't know that there's sugar in what you're eating. And so it makes sense. We don't have the same experiences as other people do in their cultural cuisine of like bitter or astringent or acidity, which is all stuff that can, or, savoriness that's part of in your beverage, which is all part of wine. So yeah, that's a lot of people's starting place, Moscato or some other type of sweet wine. But this is not to say that I haven't had like inexpensive wines. Like to pass the Master of Wine exam, you're expected to know all types of consumers, because there's wine for everybody, right? So like I had, Yellowtail on my exam. I had Dom Perignon. So you really have to know
yeah,
everything's out there and all types of consumers and different price points.
So you start working at you moved to Napa and you start working at a vineyard. Which one did you start working at?
Yeah, my very first job was at a winery that I still love called Arietta. So it's a family-owned winery, but amazing opportunity. I was the first employee that they had ever had that wasn't, part of the production process. So I really got to learn all parts of the business. It's a lovely family, and they happen to have a very famous consulting winemaker too, named Andy Erickson. So it was just an awesome jumping off place. So that was my start. I worked for a place called Donna Estates for many years too, and now I'm the head of wine for a national retailer called Wine Access. But all during that time I was studying. So from the time I took that first class, just like amateur class in New York, I started taking classes, and then I started doing like the more serious professional classes in New York, and was still doing that when I came out here, and then finally started the Master of Wine program after I was already living in Napa Valley.
What I love about your story is you were pursuing one thing and then completely said, nah, I'm going to start over and pursue something else. I often preach this over the 11 years of the podcast of, if you don't like what you're doing, or you think maybe you want to try something else, I firmly believe that you should, because you can always go back and do what you were doing instead of sitting in something and going, I should have really tried some other stuff over my lifetime,
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I think you'll understand this, is that, also, I was singing, I had gigs, but like, I was never going to be super famous. I wasn't going to get a record deal. So, I loved it, but I had to be honest with myself too, and say like, wow, this other thing is really cool. I love it. Do I want to just keep doing this because I know it, or because my parents are going to be disappointed
yeah.
that I'm not, that I'm not doing it. But it wasn't easy either. It was like, for me, it was such a part of my identity, my entire life. Like, who am I? I'm a singer. That's who I am. That's how my friends know me. That's how my family knows me. I spent a lot of money going to school for it. But so it was almost like I had to get to a point where I had to sort of say goodbye to it, like it was a dear friend. And there was a sadness to that too,
Oh yeah. I mean, because there is that inner feeling inside of you of like, did I give up? But I don't believe that. I don't believe people give up on their dreams. I think they obtain other dreams in life. And then if they don't pursue those other dreams, then it becomes a swirl of emotions. Like, I always knew I wasn't good enough at this, and maybe I would have done it's, my whole life, I felt like I should do comedy, but I also loved music, and it was what I knew the most to get into. There wasn't kids doing comedy where I was in the neighborhood, but there's kids playing music. So yeah, music is very attractive at a young age because it's the arts, and then you get into it, you realize there's so much to it. There's writing songs, there's writing lyrics, melodies, there's grinding it out, finding other bandmates or whatever kind of thing you're trying to do. There's mostly with music, I would say about 75% of it, you need other people involved. So then you have to rely on other people's work ethic and their girlfriends and boyfriends or whatever their problems are in life. So yeah, it's a really gnarly road.
Yeah.
I have a question. So you said you were the first to work at this winery as a non-maker. So how does this happen? You go out to Sonoma and you're like, all right, I want to get into the wine world. Are you knocking on doors saying, I'll just do anything? What's happening there?
Yeah. Well, so I was trying to apply to things while I was still living in New York. So there's this website called winejobs.com. So you can probably tell what that's all about. So I was looking at these jobs in Napa, and I'm calling people up or sending them my resume. and they're like, okay, yeah, let's like have a follow-up. Can you come in tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I live in New York, but really I'm going to move out there. And then they'd be like, click, and so finally one day I was just like, I just got to go, and that like that phrase, like leap and the net will appear.
Yeah. I
just thought that's what I got to do. So I moved out here. I had my air mattress and my cat.
Well, did you drive across country?
I did fly with my cat, which was another experience, but I had never owned a car in my life.
Wow. Did you grow up in New York, in the city?
I grew up in Texas and then Virginia and West Virginia, mostly before New York, but I never owned a car. So, so I came out here and then like, basically all of a sudden everything dried up. I'm looking on that website and I'm like, there were like 100 things last week and now there's nothing. Oh. And so, no, you know what I did? I took a job at the tasting room of Robert Mondavi.
Wow. Great.
I was like, let's do this. But it was a great experience actually, because you see so many people coming through and you learn to tell the story of Napa and, how to tell people about wine. And anyway, and honestly, I had never had this wine Arietta, but I was a musician. And of course, Arietta means like little song. Yeah. And I was like, I got to meet these people. So basically I like, introduced myself to like talk myself into having, coffee, and I left with the job.
That's great. That's great. Now at the time, how many years ago was this?
That was 2010.
Okay. So 2010, the amount of how Sonoma and Napa area has changed from 2010 to 2022. I mean, it's straight up high baller now up there.
Oh yeah. It's like Disneyland for adults.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, perfect example too is like Bottle Rock Festival.
Oh yeah.
When that came around, I was like, a festival in Napa? I get it. Great theme, Bottle Rock and stuff. But I was like, are there enough people up? Oh yeah, there's people out there. And it kind of goes from like Marin County, and then you got Petaluma and Sonoma County all the way up to Napa. And that whole area is just kind of money now. And fine wines and foods and farm to table. And it really is this kind of boutique world of all kinds of good stuff that people are making and cooking and all of that up there, right?
Totally. And it's very expensive too. Oh. So like land in Napa, you can pay up to $1 million for an acre.
Whoa.
For a vineyard acre. Yeah.
$1 million for an acre.
It's crazy because, that's not obviously the high end, but it's not out there. It's not too far off. So like basically, Napa Valley for good reason is protected by the agricultural preserve, which means it's limited. That's why you don't have these big strip malls in the middle of Napa Valley and stuff, right? So it protects the land, but it limits how much you can plant, and particularly how much you can plant on hillsides because of erosion. So basically like Napa is essentially planted out. So you can't plant here. You can't be a new vineyard owner unless you're taking it from somebody else.
Right.
And so it's just drives it up, and then, I think obviously there's amazing, beautiful wines out here, but you look at some of the price tags on these wines and you're like, well, no wonder. I mean, look at what you had to pay for the land.
Well, I was just reading recently and a few things have happened. Of course, the massive fires over the last 5 years up there has affected the price tag. And then just recently I was reading the supply of wine bottles. There are none right now. So there's another problem.
It's honestly nuts. Yeah. So you're exactly right. There's kind of two major fires right here in Napa Valley, but then of course all around us too in other years, but 2017 and then 2020 was the really devastating one here. So a lot of people won't have wine that they're going to release from that vintage, but yeah. And then COVID hit, and like other industries too, it's like you can't get bottles, you can't get glasses, you can't get labels, you can't get corks, you can't. It's just crazy.
Yeah. It seems like I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like every industry is like, all right, we missed out on 2 years of money. So let's just say everything's hard to get and we'll just triple the price of anything. Used cars, wine, watches, any luxury items, Porsches, it's just like, what?
Who knows? And then, of course, also, I'm work for a wine retailer, so we ship wine all over the United States, but we're very reliant on a lot of wines coming in the country from Europe. And to get something through a port, it's crazy. I mean, it's getting a little better, but these ships would, just sit off of the port of Oakland for like 2 months, 3 months, because there's just nobody to unload them.
That's crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get into it. So you're working at the winery, you start at the tasting room, then you go and you start working at this winery. And at what point do you say, all right, I want to study? And is there like a school, or how do you get ready to take the master class?
Yeah. So I had done all of the levels that I could through a program called the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. So I'd finished that while I was here, and I was honestly a little burnt out. And I was like, I think that's probably it. This is as far as I'm going to go. And so I was just working. And then I remember starting to be around conversations, like particularly when around winemakers, and they were talking about things that involved chemistry or, things that I was like, I don't really know what that is. And so my brain started humming again. And I'm just a very curious person. Like I need to always be like learning, what's the next thing I can kind of feed my brain with. And so I reconsidered that, and I was lucky enough to know some people who had gone into the Master of Wine program. So I talked with them, but you have to apply to get admitted to it. You take an exam to be admitted to it, and then it's a minimum 3-year process, but could take up to 7. And then so the first exam was in 1953. It's an organization based out of the UK. And since 1953, there's been fewer than 500 people to pass the exam. So it's a serious commitment. You have to be really ready to annoy all of your friends and family a lot.
So you sit down and you take this. How long is the test, and how many questions, or are you drinking stuff and they're asking you questions? What's going on there?
Yeah, both. So there's several years. It's called like stage 1. There's a stage 1 assessment. So you have to pass that, or you have to repeat it, or they kick you out at that point. And then at that point, if you pass through stage 1, you become eligible to sit, like, I'll just call it the big exam. So it's essentially a 4-day exam. Half of it is theory. So all written, everything we do is in essay form, even our tasting notes about wine. So it's all day writing about things like, viticulture. So, the growing of grapes, vinification, meaning the winemaking. There's things about law, current events, the handling of wine, health, anything, that they want to throw at you. But essentially it's an exam that's about critical thinking. So it's not an exam. The Master of Wine exam is not an exam that you're just memorizing flashcards. There are certifications that are like that, and they're really hard too. But for this one, what made it interesting is you have to kind of pull in your knowledge of all aspects and then form an argument. So you're almost going to like argue like a lawyer, and like you're going to be a detective, and then you're going to argue your case, and you have to understand both sides and then ultimately come to a conclusion. So that's the theory portion. And then the tasting portion, we call that the practical exam. And that's 3 days. And over the course of 3 days, we taste 36 wines blind.
Whoa. You're Ubering home on those days, huh?
Well, we spit the wine out when we're taking an exam or assessing it, like as a professional. I mean, right. I am sipping a glass of champagne right now, but mostly if I'm assessing wine, for my job, I'm spitting it out.
36 wines?
Yeah.
And you're blindfolded. You're
not blindfolded, but when we say blind, it means that you just have a glass in front of you.
No label.
No context. You're just so you're just going on, what am I seeing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? And for me, what am I feeling? Because a big part of how I taste wine is what I call like a palate feel.
Of course.
And anyway, and then from there, this is all essay format, but you're expected to know things like, vintage, certainly what grape variety is it, region, quality level, price, how is it made? And then how would you sell this wine to a consumer? Like, who's the right customer base for this? All based on like what you're tasting in the glass.
How do they grade the test? Is it actually like missed questions, or because of it being a lot of essay and stuff, how do they grade that test?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So ultimately, if you pass, you never see your exam. So,
oh really?
No, but you do know, because they will release later what the wines were. So like what I did every day, I walked out, and you're just kind of in a brain fog because it's timed also. So you're like rushing, and it's crazy, and there's adrenaline. And so I wrote down what I had called each wine. in that day. And then a couple of days later, they release it. So you can kind of know like, hey, I got this number right, but ultimately each wine is weighted 25 points. And so again, you're kind of building your argument because you could go in, let's say I was like, tasted it. I was like, you know what? I know what this is. This is a 2016, Corton Charlemagne. And that's all I wrote. And I was right. I would fail that question because I didn't show my work. So you have to just kind of start with like, why do you think this? Back it up. Is it like something else that I could consider? And so you're showing that you understand the world of wine. And then ultimately, okay, this is what I'm going to call. But based on what I'm tasting, I could have gone this way, but ultimately I'm going this way. And this is my final. So there are ways also to pick up points and be wrong. Like you could still, if you like got really close, you got all the way down to like, this is either Albarino or Gruner Veltliner. And at the last minute I went Gruner and it was Albarino. You could still pick up points, but ultimately you have to get most of the wines right.
Let me ask you this. We always hear about, the $1 million bottle of wine or whatever, and there was this period where there were wines that were just $1 zillion. I mean, I've been to restaurants and they come around, here's a salad de boublage. It is $7.50 a glass. Yeah. And you're like, what? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
And there was that whole thing of like rare wines.
Like cult wines.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think, and this is me going back to the Coppola thing, there became these wines that were known as incredible that were like $30-$40 a bottle that people are like, this is a whole new era of wine. What is a spectacular bottle of wine that's affordable? And what is the most expensive wine you've ever drank?
Oh man. Let me start with expensive. I mean, I have been lucky enough to try Screaming Eagle, and DRC, which can cost, a car basically. Now I didn't buy this.
Oh yeah. We get it. Yeah. I always let people know that too. They go, hey, this fucking guy is rich. He's like, no. Even if I was, I wouldn't spend 10 grand on, such to say, but how much is Screaming Eagle? And was it a glass or did you drink a bottle?
It was I've been lucky enough to try a couple bottles over time. I think on release, it's close to $2,000 now. But of course, if you get it on a restaurant or it's a library vintage, you're going to pay upwards of, $10,000 easily
for the
easily
bottle? For the bottle. And then what do you like? What did you like about it? Did you think it was worth it or were you like,
I love this question because actually, so it was beautiful bottle. But I think what's interesting is these bottles, like, again, this is a very known cult wine, right? The Screaming Eagle, but we could be talking about other wines. We could be talking about Domaine de la Romanée-Conti or something. But at some point, I believe it's, what does it mean to you?
Right. Right.
Because was it delicious? Oh my God, yes. Right. Is it $10,000 better than another bottle of wine? If it's worth it to you, yeah.
So that's what I say. People are like, I got a fucking $20 watch. That's the same as yours. Like, yeah, well, that's not what it's about. That bottle of wine has soul. That thing has history. That has roots and blood and sweat and stories,
Yeah.
Same with some great watches or a great piece of denim or whatever. So, where is the Screaming Eagle made?
It's in Oakville. So it's a winery in Oakville. They do not let you visit.
Really? Why?
Hard as you. They're very small production, first of all, but they would just get inundated again. And it's too expensive, to pour those bottles. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, what is it worth to you? And then also like, who were you with? How are you feeling? Like, what memory do you have of it? And like, you asked me about, like, this champagne I'm drinking right now it's like $30. It's basically a $30 champagne, which for champagne is not that expensive. I love this, but there's for me, I know this producer, there's a story. It means something to me because I look at this bottle and I remember visiting and meeting the owners and their cat.
Yeah.
And the guy had dropped a bottle right before I got there. And so his shirt was wet. And it's like all that stuff that you look at it. And I think it's the same with music, right? Like, do you sometimes just hear something and it's like, instantly you're like in a different place, in a different time, you're with that person and what were they wearing
Well, that's what music is to most people. Whenever somebody says there's no good music anymore, I realize they don't really care about seeking out new music. Music to them is a time machine back to when they didn't have bills or a mortgage, maybe, or a divorce. It takes them back to I was single. We were in a Camaro. We were, driving around, smoking joints. That's what music is. It can take you all over.
Yeah.
And that's what wine can do. And wine is right now a lot like the coffee world. There was some click a while ago where everyone got into coffee and wine, and I love coffee. And I drink a Starbucks because it's everywhere. But do I like it? No, it's just what I do. But once I started drinking some great coffees. And I just love Blue Bottle, which is a fantastic coffee. I don't put anything in my coffees. And I think a lot of people do because it tastes like shit and they're trying to dilute it. But if I go to a Blue Bottle and get a nice cappuccino or Americano, I drink that thing just straight. It tastes like a mocha, kind of chocolatey, deep coffee. And I love that kind of stuff. So I can relate to the wine people because I understand what it's all about. You know?
I have a question for you, actually. So, there's been a lot of things written about this wine culture in the NBA, let's say. Baxter Holmes wrote something about like all these, famous players, and they have these like wine clubs and they bring the wine on the plane afterward. And they're all kind of like, who can one up each other? It's like a real thing. And
right.
What is it like? Do you see that, let's say, either with comedians, or I know you're all around these like amazing bands, Metallica, Greta Van Fleet, these guys, like, do you see any of that there?
Well, I think the interesting thing in the world that really blows my mind is there's a thing where people start to make money and the fans can turn on them. Like, look at these bougie fucking asshole. They want you to be blue collar for life. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people understand, say like me, who grew up, food stamps, single mom, terrible, no money. I think that people don't understand if you work your ass off and get to somewhere, you start to learn about great stuff. Mm-hmm. May it be wine or cars or a place to go skiing in Swiss Alps or whatever it is. And you start to lose your mind like, wow. And what I see with the people that start to make money, other cool people come around like, look, I met you guys, and you share each other's knowledges. And you learn and you seek out, like, why do people smoke these cigars? Okay, Cuban. I went to Honduras. Mm-hmm. I saw them hand roll these cigars out in the jungle, and I started to understand that. I don't smoke cigars, but I still wanted to understand that. So you learn fine stuff, and in a lot of people's minds, it's just like overpriced. You're an idiot and all this, instead of like, good for you. You're seeking out a better, like, look, I love mac and cheese and top ramen. I grew up on it, but I also love caviar or something, that Wolfgang Puck brought over that I would never buy. I don't know anything about it, but you try and you go, whoa, what is this? So I think that the people that start to make there's two types of fame levels. There's one that's just kind of white trash forever. They're like, we booze, we made money, whatever. And then there's that kind of other where they're like, I want to seek out what life is. And it is in there in the rock and roll world. I know Kirk Hammett and Lars, Lars was into fine art. Probably because he had a European upbringing. I loved art, painters seeking out, why are these painters the greatest? Go to the Louvre, learn that kind of stuff. And, Kirk Hammett into fine fashion. I love fashion. Who are the greats in the fashion world? All of that, so there are people in bands that they seek out stuff because they're around fashion. They're around different types of people that make money and wealth and culture and stuff. And I think to me, it's really about life, seeking out as much cool stuff as you can before you die, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I co-host on a podcast called Wine Access Unfiltered. And the whole premise of that is to have people who are extremely successful in their own industry, but are not in the wine industry. So, we've had musicians, comedians, philanthropists, CEOs, economic people. It's been like economists. I mean, it's been really interesting to talk to them. But there have been a number of comedians. So like Steve Byrne was on, right? Bert Kreischer, Tom Papa. Yeah. And so that's kind of what made me think of it. Cause like just wondering if there's sort of this building of wine curiosity among that field as well.
Absolutely. I believe that, there's comedians out there that, like I said, you travel around, you get to a city, and whoever they kind of, hip people in that town, if you're a rising star and the buzz is out on you, they end up in the green room. And look, that's how I meet people all the time. You're like, oh, hey, like I'm out with Bill and Bill Burr, and different people come down. Or if I was traveling with the Stones or whatever, you start to meet people, and after the show, maybe they drink some wine, they have a cigar, or they go and have some incredible food at whatever the great restaurant is in that city. There's nothing more I like doing than after the show. People are like, dude, you want to meet us at this bar? I'm like, oh no, that's the last thing I want to do. It's loud and people are screaming, and I want to go eat a fine meal and talk to people that aren't comics and see what they do and what this city's about and what's your great restaurant and everything. So yeah, there's definitely people out there that are into good wines and everything, cars, and there's comedians that are way into, like we were talking about, going out to Pebble Beach and Quail and all that, and there's people that are way into fine stuff. The sky's kind of the limit of learning and enjoying stuff. I mean, there's only so many times you can have a Jack and Coke before you go like, well, what else is out there,
Yeah, for sure. But I love what you said though about like sort of meeting at the table and having food, because really that's what wine is meant to do, right? Bring people together, inspire conversation. We don't have to agree, but and you loosen up a little bit too. And who knows what happens next, but I like that especially too, because again, look, I think that wine, and this is something that I really try to work on as someone who's in the industry, like something like a classical music, has this sort of perceived barrier to entry.
Absolutely.
I don't know anything about it, so I can't.
It costs a lot of money. Right. A lot of people think that, wine, it costs a lot of, there was that thing for years. Yeah. Wine costs a lot of money, and a lot like watches. People are like, watches, they cost a lot of money. It's not, there's all kinds of different levels of fine stuff, Well, for sure. And it goes back to what we were talking about originally, which is like, who's going to judge? No one's going to judge you on what you're feeling. Right. So like, you go to a concert, you may not have ever heard, an opera before, but if you dig it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Like, it's your body, it's your ears and eyes, and, and like, same with wine. It's like, if it's meant to be enjoyed, and you don't have to have some, level of knowledge or be able to pronounce every single word that's on the label or, blind taste it, but it's meant to be enjoyed. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you guys were sitting there talking about wine, and I don't drink wine, but I still was fascinated to hear. I want to know what the best is in everything in life. What's the best wine? What's the best car? What's the best hotel to stay at? What's the best suit to get? What's the best glasses to wear? I just like to know fine. And usually the best, it doesn't mean the most expensive. I would say 99% of the time, the best means something that somebody put their heart and soul into.
Yeah.
Usually there's no corporation involved in it, and there's no, it's always a family. There's always got a story. This dude moved from such and such with $7, planted one grapevine, and he stomped it himself and sold it. And then a family drank it and provided money for him. And you're like, oh yeah, tell me more about this guy,
Yeah. No, it's cool that you say that because at our dinner, of course, you and Reiner, you're talking cars, and I don't really know much about it. Well, when I say much, I know nothing. Right?
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, this is actually similar conversations, because you're talking about these people who put like their heart and their soul and their blood and their sweat. And there's like so many details that I would never have thought of that go into it. And yeah, it's similar. So I was like, I know you're like, oh, this is boring for you. And I was like, hell no, like, this is fascinating. Cause like, I know all the things you're talking about. I could describe like what happens in wine, but you're speaking a language that I'm not familiar with, but there's clearly so much passion around it.
Yeah. And another thing really wild about grapes and wine is like coffee and cigars. Nature is the boss. So nature lets you know if you're going to make money this year or not, which is the scariest thing ever. With automobiles or watches, it's you and metal, and you're just making it. But with stuff like coffee, wine, and cigars, you are like, oh no, we had a fire, no wine this year. And that's just that's a low tragedy in what happened up there, because people lost their homes. Yes. And it's horrific. But still, when families put all their money is needed, from this crop, or they might not stay in business, you could have a history go away, 100-year history in the stroke of nature,
Oh yeah.
Especially what's going on right now with global warming and the fires and everything. Wines could be gone,
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that, of course, because this is agriculture. I mean, as much as we're talking about, luxury brands and, sort of sexiness and romance, like it's farming. And so, yeah. And you only have one shot, right? Because you only get to harvest once a year. So you can spend your whole year, and in a day you could have frost or hail or a fire or something like that. And it's just like, well, got to wait till next year,
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. Yeah. And you got to have enough money in the bank to make it through that year,
Exactly. Yeah.
So you pass the course, you become a wine master. Mm-hmm. And what happens with you next? Because of course we met at the Michelin star, handout to Wolfgang, his second one. Congrats to him. How do you get to where you are now? You pass this, and where do you go with that? You go, all right, I'm a wine master. Who needs me? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what you make of it. So, I will say it definitely, it definitely makes it easier, open some doors for conversations. And, but I kept my job. I have the same job I had before I became a master of wine. And for me, it's, it was something I did for myself, not necessarily because I was trying to get to the next level of my career. It's, but I will say it allows for more learning. And that's what goes back to like why I did in the first place. It's like, I can't sit still. Right. So like now what I think of it is not like, oh, hey, I'm a master of wine. Like it's, look at me. It's like, hey, I'm a master of wine. Can I come talk to you? Like, let's have a conversation about what you're doing, because I really want to know. And, it's kind of gives you, it shows that you put the work in. Some people certainly will kind of, try to change careers or whatever, but there's the thing about the master of wine. There's people who pass who are winemakers, who are writers, who are, I work for a retailer. So it's kind of all different types of people. And I have to say, for the most part, the people that I know from the program have kind of kept doing what they're doing. Just, they did it for themselves. And I have to say, one of the best things about it actually is the people that I've met. So it's so brutal. The study program, you get knocked down so many times, and like, there's no quota though. So you're not competing against the number of people that are taking the exam that you're only competing against yourself.
Right.
And so there's a real camaraderie among us. My study group, they'll be my friends for life. And, we saw each other absolute worst and, and at our best. And so it just builds this feeling of like, I have no inhibitions around them because they know who I am. They saw me answer something and look like a complete idiot, and then maybe the next week I had the best week of anyone in our study group, and so, but we saw that about everybody. So that's been like one of the most surprising and wonderful takeaways.
Have you been to Bottle Rock, and are you excited for this year's Bottle Rock? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I'm really excited. So I am going to completely embarrass myself and say that I live right here in Napa and I've never been, but my house or my former house, it was right above, there's a little neighborhood there called Alta Heights. It's right above the fairgrounds. And so I basically could sit outside and like listen to all the shows. I remember the first year it was like Black Keys, Alabama Shakes. It was amazing. I was just like sitting outside. But this year I would love to go because Metallica's playing.
Yeah. I love the juxtapose of Bottle Rock, it's like, I could just see people out there, try this one. And then they're up there like, I'm creeping death.
Yeah. And you've got like Chef Morimoto doing like a sushi demonstration over here. And then, you got Greta Van Fleet playing over here. And it's pretty wild. So I mean, for sure.
So how do you hook up with the Michelin star with Ryan and stuff? Do you travel with him when he hands out the stars, or what were you doing? Because you were there.
Yeah. So the company I work for, Wine Access, so we're the official wine provider of the Michelin Guide. So we're partners with them, and we actually have a subscription where you get 5 shipments a year of 4 different bottles of wine, and each of those is focused on a different Michelin restaurant. So I work with the wine director or the sommelier, and basically it's like, if you were going to be in this restaurant, if you were going to go to Per Se, let's say, which was our holiday shipment, what are 4 bottles that you might have if you go there, but you get shipped right to your home, and then, with recipes and all that. So I was in LA because our first quarter shipment this year is with Chef Gary Menes of Le Comptoir, which is a 1-star Michelin. It's basically in like Koreatown, and it has, I think it's either 8 or 10 seats. That's it. So teeny like counter service, but amazing food. And so I went down there and filmed some videos with him. So we were talking about his food and the wines that we selected for the shipment. And then of course, Ryan was down there giving out Michelin stars. So met up with him, and I thought that was so cool. You weren't there in time to see them get a cut, but just like seeing someone who has that achievement and is rewarded for all their hard work. And like every single person was there in the restaurant, from the front of the house, back of the house, and just like seeing the look on their faces was like, I would be a fly on the wall any day if I get to see things like that.
Oh, it was an amazing night. It really was an amazing night. It's some of those things I've felt lucky in life of being included on stuff like that, where you're sitting down with the guy who is basically one of the greatest chefs ever, and just hearing the stories, and he's not jaded. He's not burnt out. He's just festive, You're like, God, this guy made it. How hard it's almost impossible for a restaurant to make it.
Yeah.
Almost impossible. And there he was, just stars in his eyes, just great. And we were eating some insane food, man.
Oh,
what was your favorite, man? I it was unbelievable. I thought that bone in New York was unreal.
That was, of the steaks we had, that was my favorite. But I don't know if you remember, towards the beginning, there was the oyster with caviar.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Because how can you go wrong with 2 things in one bite like that? So.
And those squid rolls. Oh my God.
But I have to tell you, I can't keep up. Like by the last course there, I was just like holding up a white napkin. Like
I was done too. I was like, I got in the car, and I was like, I had my leather jacket. I was like, this is out of here. I got home and I laid down right away. I mean, I don't eat that big. Look, I'll eat a good meal, but not that. I mean, it just kept coming and coming. Yeah. And Ryan's like, we have to eat it. We don't want to show disrespect. And I'm like, dude, there's 3 of us here. It's like, I can't even move right now.
I know.
Oh my God. It was a great night. And it was so cool to meet you.
Likewise.
And it's great to talk to you about wine and get that out there. What is the website real quick for people to go to?
Wineaccess.com.
And then your podcast, what's it called?
Wine Access Unfiltered. And so you can find us in all the normal places, iTunes, Spotify, etc.
Yeah. And thank you so much for doing the show.
Thank you.
It was great to meet you. I hope to see you at Bottle Rock for sure. And if you are in Los Angeles, come see some comedy, or if I'm up in San Fran, like we said before, and I'm doing comedy, you got to come see that. You a big comedy fan?
I love it. You know it. I will be there because I've never seen you live. So it's top of my list. Yeah.
I think Marin's coming to Sonoma or Napa here in a couple weeks.
Right on. All right. I'll have to check it out.
Oh, yeah. You'll love that. All right. Thank you so much for doing the show.
Thank you, Dean.
Great to have you on. And you got an Instagram?
I do. I'm just Vanessa Conlon, my name. I didn't get fancy. And then at Wine Access, if you want to follow that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for doing the show.
Thanks, Dean. Cheers.
Have a great week, huh?
You too.
See you later.